Fantastic. Welcome everybody to this first of 4 amazing Imagination TV sessions being hosted throughout the Learning Planet Festival week. So privileged to be co-hosting the session today. My name is Ed Stevenette from the Learning Planet team, and this is one of 500 amazing events happening around the world this year for the Learning Planet Festival. And it's an opportunity for us each day of the festival to kick off with a session on imagination, connecting in to one of our core subjects of focus. And so that today is exploring educating at the margins. I'm calling you from Paris in France, but we're joined today by an incredible collection of people from around the world. Would love first to give the space to Bem, my co-host. Bem, do introduce yourself.
Right, hi everyone from West Africa, Nigeria. My name is Bem. I've worked with AIM for a number of years, and I'm just passionate about seeing people learn without any obstructions and get access to opportunities as they abound. I will be your co-host today, and we hope you enjoy the session.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so today is a conversation around inspiring initiatives, imaginative solutions to provide access to learning, notably for refugees. So from setting up schools to 2,000 students in a day, transporting libraries barely the size of a cardboard box. For us, imagination is the beginning of human thought and action. It drives change, and we want to see it in action to transform education. That's what we're doing with AIM and Learning Planet through developing our Imagination Circle throughout the year, bringing imagination into every classroom. And we invite you just to enjoy these sessions across the whole week and bring this imaginative space to the festival this year as well. And just before we get started and invite the speakers, we'll give you a quick picture of what we've been discussing about so far in the circle.
Humanity is facing a number of different pressure points where we actually need imaginative thinking.
We have 7 billion imaginations, and this is what will give us hope for a better world, for sure.
The starting point to imagine an alternative future is to realize that the only thing that travels faster than light is imagination.
Let's start by imagining together what makes us human. How do we create the conditions to express our humanity?
Imagination is a key kind of part of the route to empathy, and also to find ways to engage with the sublime.
It's about understanding imagination as the key to so many different doors.
Over the past centuries, in my early years, I notably experienced life as an artist, a prisoner, a Buddhist monk, a junkie, a genius, a poetess, an assassin, a mother, and even a rabbit. This was pretty stimulating. I would love for all kids to experience as many lives as possible.
I am 17 years old. Sometimes I myself wish that I had the imagination of a small child. A child does not think too much about the hardships of life, but rather build a world that he or she wants to see.
How do we imagine the best way to foster imagination?
It's really a fundamental
concept for us as humans to have imagination. Imagination plays a really important role in how we look at the world and how we build our own future as well.
What is that possible future where all of our societies can live peacefully? And what do we need to learn to actually become that kind of species that doesn't require violence to evolve? Can that be one of key contributions of our imagination capacity?
That imaginative capacity to wander yourself into a path, and then the energy to move is something that's critical.
The unexpected can come out, and what do we do to enable that to happen?
Imagination in its simplest forms is playing with possibility.
Let us imagine education as a big puzzle, and each of us have different pieces of that puzzle. So if we connect all people together and they can share their puzzle pieces, and then we can solve the whole puzzle.
Allow them to really imagine what they can do for a better world and for a better future. That really allows them to take action, and that action gives them hope for the future. We're all about ensuring that every single person really is able to chart their own path of success.
If you redefine and reimagine the idea of success to be thriving, then every child has the ability and the potential to succeed in their own way because they define their own success.
What comes with imagination is ultimately creativity, and with that fear, there's something so truly transformative about being able to express ourselves deeply.
It's in those moments of stillness, when we reconnect with our most innermost feelings, is where imagination gets activated.
There we go. So that gives a picture of some of the things we've been discussing, notably at our launch earlier in the year. But we'd love now just to open up to get to know the panel here today. The session's going to be very interactive. There'll be lots of discussion. Don't hesitate to add any questions as well in the chat. But Gerhard, maybe you can take a moment first to introduce yourself. Where does imagination come for you in your work?
Yeah, thanks so much, Edward, and also to Pam and to the organizers of the event. Yeah, I'm Gerhard Pulfer. I'm based in Austria, and I work for Porticus on education and displacement. So Porticus is a global philanthropic organization, and you can learn more about Porticus on its website. It's www.porticus.com, and I can post it into the chat later on. The topic of our conversation is educating at the margins. And so what I imagine is a world where each child has a chance to succeed in life, to fulfill his or her potential, and regardless of the adverse conditions they live in. And how can we possibly get there? First, I'll ask myself, what do we mean by margins? So for my work, it concretely means children in displacement contexts. It's refugees, it's internally displaced children, it's asylum seekers. And we should not forget that their number has rapidly increased over the past decade. So 10 years ago, there were about 40 million displaced people. Today, we are talking about 100 million, or more than 100 million of displaced people. And the trend is clear. There will be more displacement because of conflict, because of crisis, and because of climate change. And the predictions for displacement as a result of climate change are really dim. So when we talk about educating in displacement, why is it special, and what is different about it? Here we need to understand that these children, at one point, that their life has changed dramatically for the worse. They have, everything around them has disappeared. The life they knew is no longer there. They might have lost loved ones. They live in security or insecurity and might even lack basic needs. So in this uncertainty, the only thing that no one can take away from them is really education. but we also need to consider the cumulative stress factors that these children face. And here one cannot talk about business as usual when we talk about education at the margins or education and displacement, in my opinion. So it's not about only access to education or access to school. I think this has been the focus of the sector for too long. There's no doubt access is important, but we also need to consider the quality, because a child cannot learn if it faces anxiety, if it faces depression, if it faces toxic stress. Child might be locked in the fight and flight mode. So quality dimensions are very important. What do we mean by quality dimensions? So this, for example, means a safe and welcoming school environment. We need to make sure that there are conditions in place, that children can connect to the teachers, that children can connect amongst themselves. We also need to consider that there is differentiated and engaging pedagogy. The pedagogy is very important. And on top of that, we also need to consider social and emotional learning and psychosocial support that strengthens the individual resilience. For example, we understand from science, for example, that mindfulness exercises can play an important role here. And the attention also needs to stretch to the parents and to the communities. It's not only about the classroom or the school, it's about the community, the parents as well. All this is not on top of literacy and numeracy education, but this is really about the preconditions for literacy and numeracy and for enabling a child to learn and to develop. And for me, the key is really not only to base our thinking on our imagination, but to tap into the imagination of those people at the margins, to include them in the conversation, to harness their knowledge, to harness their experience, and get the space to bring in their imagination, because this is what ultimately counts. And yeah, that's why I think we need to continue to engage, continue to fund, and the vision where each child has a chance to succeed in life can be realized. And I'm convinced this is both possible and within reach. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Gerhard. And it really resonates with, we had Mohamed Arunde yesterday on LPTV, who is an amazing refugee who's also part of the Bigger Than Us documentary film, and has set up some incredible education programs in schools. And it really resonates exactly around pushing imagination, but also not seeing education as just this standalone kind of separate thing to work on, but it's part of a bigger picture of support as well. Fiston, maybe we can go to you next. You're calling from Nakivale refugee camp as well in Uganda. Maybe share with us in a couple of minutes a bit about yourself and where imagination comes in for you in your work as well.
Thank you so much, Ed. And hi, everybody. I'm Fiston, calling in from Uganda in a refugee camp. Over the past years, I've been, well, I wouldn't call it teaching, but I've been educating. Like I've been more into educating. And to me, like imagination being a critical part of every education or any context into education. I don't think making it simply imagination, be an imagination, really helps a lot. I'm rather looking at the components that prepares for the imagination. First of all, let me put it this way. I think well-being is much bigger than the imagination that we talk about. And so this comes in at every stage, especially not counting the actions. Most of times we sit down and we design solutions into this education gap, but I don't see educators or the education system or any activism into education having a time to to find that ground, that common ground, and think about imagination in the ways that they do their work. I'll give a context. For example, I'm in a place where we host about 150,000 refugees, and all these people are from different places, right? Technically, they have different customs, they have different behaviors, they have different ways to look at things, they have different ways to adapt to things. So pulling out imagination, this looks to me, that's the core thing of everything that we want to do with education, at the margin. Last time, like yesterday, I saw a post by Refugee Point. I think it's an NGO based in the US that says for refugees, education is so important. And I said, well, that's not, definitely true. Let's count how many refugees have, been able to go to school over the past 5 years, and how many are still not going, haven't gone to school. And that's because of maybe bureaucracy, language barriers. So looking at, the matter of things, imagination should be and must be the very first ground that we prepare, when you're creating any solutions. So that's how to put it out.
Thank you so much, Fiston. There's a lot you pointed out, and I want to touch on a few things that you said there. The environment that you find yourself in and the people you're working with, by design, they have to imagine things to be able to operate, because they are confined in an environment where the norm no longer exists per se. So it's a fantastic place to get a lot of ideas on rethinking some of the ways we live in the so-called normal society. And I got back to Nigeria sometime in 2018, and I moved to Northeast Nigeria that is supposedly plagued with terrorism and Boko Haram and all of that. And I was based in Yola in Northeast Nigeria. And what I experienced with the kids and with the society and just interacting in that space was just fantastic. For the first time in a very long time, after staying in big cities and all of that, you would walk into a shop and people would say hi to you. You're walking on the street and people want to engage with you. People smile. People pay each other's transport. When they see a kid in a bus, they pay for them. It was just completely different to the narrative I was getting from what the media had portrayed this place to be. So thank you very much for lending your voice, and we definitely look forward to learning a lot more from you. And please, in the chat room, drop your questions. We will be sharing them with the hosts, and we'll be sharing them with the guests and making sure that this is as interactive as possible.
I just wanted to add something with imagination, by the way. Let me first turn this as a chapter and say when someone is a refugee, the very first thing that comes, and very vital, something they pay so much attention to is hope. When I fled my country, I didn't have any other thing to care about other than my security. So even as we talk about this, what comes in me is, they're just what if, by the way. The what ifs statement is, how about imagining the kind of education that we want to give to these refugees, right? I will tell you one time I got embarrassed. I got embarrassed because I walked into this bank, it's a micro financing, institution, whatever. So then I wanted to create a bank account because I need to have that for some reasons. I was applying for studies. And this banker looked at me and said, well, you don't look like someone that can handle a computer. So you should get distanced from a laptop. And I said, well, I can actually turn this computer into something else if you want me to do so. Right? Why am I saying this? Is because even though we run and we flee our countries to come into refugee camps, being called refugees, that does not necessarily mean that we deserve special attention or special care. It would be much better to regard ourselves as just those pertaining into this country on that ground. And when we are designing solutions, let's design that way that does not exclude them. To me, I have a sense that education for refugees is being more exclusively for refugees. And I'm like, we should imagine the kind of the world that we are actually fighting for, we're thriving to see. It's a world with no violence, it's a world with equity. And when we are still not promoting equality, I don't see that, changing over the years. I met people laugh yesterday and said, I'm already worried of the kids that I'm going to produce, so I'm almost not getting married. And that's simply because what I'm living now, I don't want my kids to live this kind of life, right? Right. So maybe that to bring us back, that should be our first thing to all the institutions, like philanthropic organizations. Even when we are funding, we are allocating resources. Should we just say, well, we want to support, and not to command our support? There's a sense this is done, help is done to promote these kind of things, and then there are conditions involved into it. I have a feeling we have a window trust, I think it's in Uganda, and it helps young refugees to go to school, to regain their chances to go to school. But maybe only 2% of the refugees actually get the opportunity to go to school. And that's because of papers. Some people are, you're requested to bring all the papers when you fled your country and you can't access all the papers. Maybe this is something to look at as we promote education to refugees or educating at the margins. What is that education that we want to see? And not only us, are we sure that these refugees are happy opting to this kind of education? To me, if we go very, very down and do a survey, we will have so much to solve, so much to design, because the voices then and the solutions proposed will be coming from those very, very low local levels. And not only seated in by we, I mean those that think they can design solutions for a community, not seated in luxurious hotels and restaurants to design solutions, right? When we're making research, for example, a survey or a visit, you don't come and stay in a hotel to do research. You come down and sit with the person, let the youth group talk to you lively. So by the time you are designing solutions, you're not designing solutions by the way you've been taught or by the way the system frames you, but by the way you feel the pain and the need from these special or specific people, right? So that's how I would have to put it out. Because I had a chance to go to different camps in Uganda. Uganda has about 11. And fellow young people have completely different goals, different visions, how they imagine their lives to be. I was amazed to see a very big chunk of people still want to go back to their countries because they believe they're even getting more pain here. Like apart from bullets, gunshots, there's nothing else has changed. We still starve. We still lack jobs. We still have, we do not have enough access to education. That is, yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry. I'm being emotional somehow.
No. Well, it is an emotional thing. Education never stops. It's part of humanity, and the continuous learning is what is getting us to where we are. And I guess this is a perfect segue to bring Muy-Cheng into the conversation, who has been finding solutions of her own. So I'll let you introduce yourself and share a bit about what you do with the group.
Thank you very much, Ben, for the introduction. And I'm so fascinated and so happy to be a part of this group and this discussion. It's really insightful and really resonates with insights that we're discussing all the day within the organization. So my name is Muy-Cheng, and I work for, I'm the education director and impact and research director for Libraries Without Borders, which is a nonprofit that was created 15 years ago to promote access, but also accessibility to knowledge for vulnerable populations throughout the world. We work in different contexts, from humanitarian crisis, post-conflict, disaster, to low and middle income countries, but also in high income countries, trying to serve underserved communities. Perhaps I can tell you a little bit about why the organization was created, and because that really, I think, shines a light on the way we work and the way we see imagination and grassroots imagination and the importance of it. So the organization was created by our current director, Jeremy Lachelle, and the historian, Patrick Bay, who is a specialist on immigration. And it started with this idea that there were lots of books that people did not want and that went to garbage, and that was such a shame. That being said, there were also lots of books donations towards countries of the South that were not thought or designed at all. People were donating the books they didn't want anymore to countries, thinking that that was better than nothing. But in what we saw was that in some cases, it was actually disrupting the publishing ecosystem locally, because donations created less incentive for publishers, for bookstores, for libraries to acquire, to create content locally. And so Libraries Without Borders started with this idea of collecting books, but creating an online catalog that partners in the field could browse, and from which they could choose the books that they really needed and the books that were adapted to their context. We saw so many libraries with books that were completely irrelevant to the interest, to the needs, to the imagination of the local communities. And so that's really what we wanted to do, rethink the dynamic of cultural support, cultural development, by just actually a very simple idea, integrating the communities that were served through this project in the design of the project. And I'm telling you that because today we have really diversified the range of work that we do. So we still work a lot on paper books, but we also leverage technology for learning opportunities. We have created tools that enable us to bring the library where it's needed, but where it's not, like the Ideas Box, which is this enter the packets and can be deployed about anywhere in 20 minutes. But we still keep at the core of our work this idea of integrating local stakeholders in the design of the project, and not only providing feedback, but really designing the project. And I think that's what really resonates with me while hearing you, Fiston, hearing you, Gerhard, talk. It's that, for me, imagination is not an option. It's not something that you can put on top as a cherry on top of the cake. It's something that needs to be embedded into social innovation. Otherwise, it's just not worth it, because it's going to create solutions. It's just going to advocate for this one-size-fits-all solution, which is just an illusion. And so for me, imagination is just something that is absolutely essential. And these are things that we also see in the field, and something that I'm actually quite interested in a point of view of research. How does creativity emerge? What are the ingredients that make a community active, and how can you activate the community, and what are the different components? What's the difference between an Ideas Box that's working, where not only people have access to content, but they're actually creating their own content, and they're creating their own solutions to face the challenges, to solve the challenges that they're facing? What's the difference between all of these areas? And perhaps to give you a few examples, we had this Ideas Box that was deployed in Burundi for Congolese refugees, and a lot of them, and as you were saying, Fiston, the refugee camp is a mixture of a mixed community with people who are forced to live together, but sometimes had conflicts in their previous life as a group. And so we had this Ideas Box where at some point we heard that a group of youth has been banned from the Ideas Box, and we wanted to know why. And it's actually because they sort of stole the video recorders for the evening, because they were making a movie and needed to make the movie by nighttime, and the Ideas Box was closed, so they kept the cameras because they wanted to film by night. And it turned out that they were actually filming a zombie movie, and a zombie movie that was not simply a zombie movie, but something that was speaking of their past as child soldiers, and the ghosts that were still haunting them from people that they might have killed at some point. And so for them, this movie was just not a horror movie. It was sort of a cathartic experience for them. It was about telling their past in an innovative way so that they could explain that this is something that should not happen again. And now today, this movie is something that is shown in other refugee camps as the start of a conversation around peace building and social cohesion and the need of dialogue between communities. And this is not something that we could have dreamed of from an office in Paris. This is something that just happened in the field because at some point there was this combination of ingredients, the communities, the tools, the knowledge, the will that made it possible. And I think this is why imagination should be not on the periphery of our projects, but really at the core of it.
Muy-Cheng, thanks so much. And you're, providing a toolbox to kind of unleash or release imagination, and also for it to be adapted to specific local contexts. It really seems to come across, and giving that space for kind of the unpredictability to emerge. When you give that space for imagination, we can give that license as well for freedom to explore and to kind of find the output that works for them. We had a really brilliant question in the chat that I did want to mention now, but we can respond to it after Shiaka, your intro. But it's a question from Loza in the chat on, should the subject matter offered at the margins be different from what's provided to the learners at the centre? And more importantly, even before we answer that, what are the margins and where is the centre? And I think this is something that comes across in each of the intros so far, about, particularly from yourself, Fiston, about, are we sometimes trying to treat education at the margins as a space completely apart from the mainstreams, and where is the problem with that? But I just leave that question there for now, and Shiaka first, do share a couple of words about yourself, where imagination comes in for you in your work.
Thank you, Ed. My name is Shaka Ronyag. I'm calling in from Uganda. I'm in Kampala. I work with AIM Mentoring as a global mentor, and last year I got the opportunity to be a co-CEO at AIM. I also work as a side hustle. I work with sexual reproductive health and menstrual health. I run this organization that focuses on the stigma and the rights perspective to deal with sexual reproductive health and rights, how they affect the productivity of humans. I think that's that's good for the introduction. I have so much to say because I feel like I want to respond to what Gerhard said. I want to compliment on what Fiston said. Then Muy-Cheng also comes in. But I'll start with Lisa Loop's question in the chats. What's the margin and what's the center? Interesting question. Like, whenever someone says about like below the margin, we're going to think refugees, poor people, this, but we quickly forget that all these definitions were designed by us, all these definitions because of how we know how life works today. And when we talk of imagination, if we could imagine something different, we could not really know who is below the margin and who is the center and who is above. And when it comes to education and involving imagination in education for people below the margin or kids below the margin to access education, which education is useful, I think personally it takes me back to the question of like, what's really education? Is it getting a degree and all that stuff, or is it knowing how to read and write? What we define as education? There's a very interesting book Olivia shared with me, written by Francois. It's Learning in the 21st Century. That's the title of the book. And it created so much questions of what we know as education and what we know as what education would be. And I think the more we play with the imagination, we could find like maybe education is not about knowing how to add numbers and how to write, or education is more about connecting with each other, sharing knowledge, understanding what, because when it goes to solving challenges, who's solving the challenge and who's facing the challenge? Like what you're saying, Muy-Cheng, where you wouldn't have thought of what the solution would be, or what the young people in Burundi, like how they come up with a solution to film this about their story about being a child soldier. Of course, you can't know, you've never been a child soldier. Like, it's not you. Bob Marley once said, who feels it knows it all. So as a profession, even if I got down in the slums and they're like, okay, I'm here to solve your public health problems, and I'm not facing the problem. I feel like it's a bit unfair if I come like, yeah, I have this information. I read it in the book and this solves what you're experiencing. And it takes us back to imagination. If we are informing and educating everything we have with a source of thought, which is imagination, if it's happening this way and it's not working, there is no doubt, I believe, we need to think of another way to work, or maybe that's the way that will solve the challenge. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm just trying to show the advantage of imagination, because to me, imagination is totally creating a new thought and then working towards bringing it to life. And I feel like this is how we come up with solutions. And yeah, I totally agree. Be it education, be it what we call education today, be it solutions to the refugees or people below the poverty line or people in slums, or who we call below the margins. Whatever the involvement is we are trying to do, especially in regards to education, I think they're in the best position to imagine what better way would work for them. I don't know. I took so much time ahead.
No, Shiaka, that was amazing. I know that Ben wants to react, but what I just suggest we do now, because there's been so much wisdom, so much shared in these opening exchanges, is we take a 1.5 minute breather and just give the floor to Professor Hope, the Chancellor of Imagination University, to share what imagination and educating at the margins is for him, and then we'll go back to you, Ben.
All right, so this festival, Hope, what's it called? The
LearningPlanet Festival.
LearningPlanet Festival. Okay, well, we're all here. What are the themes? What are we getting excited
Lion, do you have my notebook from earlier today? Do you have it?
No, it's not here, Dad.
Oh gosh. It's about education at the
supermarket.
No.
Education at the moon.
No, that'd be great though.
Education at the I don't know, the festival of
margins.
Education at the margins.
Close. Okay.
What do we got?
Well, I think if we're going to think about education at the margins, we're probably thinking about hundreds of billions of other species connected to us.
Yep.
We're thinking about long time before.
Great.
We're thinking about 6 billion years that we've got left of this Earth existing before it even just goes straight into the sun.
Into the sun. 6 billion years before the sun, getting this? Everybody getting this?
Yep. And
right?
So maybe the thing we're missing, the biggest source of intelligence on planet Earth, is sitting outside the margins.
Ooh, I like that. Education at the margins, biggest source of energy, planet, people,
Platypus, you want to sing us a song to take us out?
Oh, sure. Which song?
Something like elemental, not lightning.
Thunder! 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 Thunder!
I was caught on the margin of education
because the
thunder
kept me out of my old school thunder.
Yeah, no, we'll workshop that.
Yeah.
We'll workshop. We'll be fine on the day.
Okay, great.
Everybody got it?
That's a wrap.
We got it? Right, okay, good work.
Ben, go for it.
Fantastic. Well, maybe at the next session, Eddie will try and form a song of imagination. If the puppets can do it, why can't we? So thank you, by the way, everyone, for joining us. If you've just tuned in, we are live on Imagination TV. I want to drop something as a follow-up to what Shaka had said about what we define as imagination. I went into a shop to ask for water. I wanted to get a bottle of water, and I asked the lady at the counter, I said, I want a bottle of room temperature water. And she walked straight to the fridge, brought a bottle of water to me. And I was shocked. I'm like, why did you bring me water from the fridge? And she asked, like, what was I looking for? What sort of water was I looking for? And I said, well, I want water that has not gone into the fridge. And she's like, oh, yeah, you went to university, so you know all these fancy terms. I'm like, okay, what would you refer to that sort of water as? And she said, the water is uncool. So she knew what I wanted. She just didn't know it in the terms I was presenting it. So knowledge exists everywhere. The margins are created by us, like Farid pointed out, and we must admit that there's no how a human being lives 5, 10, 20 years and they do not have any knowledge and therefore uneducated. They are just not educated in the way that the former system accepts it. Over to you, Eddie.
Thanks so much, Ben. I think it's an opportunity really for us to open up a bit. And Gerhard, I mean, from what you've been hearing as well, and from what you had mentioned at the beginning around, you know, the role and giving tools, particularly for educating, not just seeing it as a separate entity, but as something that is part of this whole experience, not just at the margins, but much more broadly. What's kind of speaking to you from what you've been hearing so far? Gerhard, if you're maybe muted at the moment.
Yeah, I think for me it was very important to hear from Fiston about what people who have experience. I think that's really the key. You only
I think we are losing slightly Gerhard, but maybe I pass that question or tag in Muy-Cheng for your reactions just to follow up, and then we'll get back to Gerhard when he returns. Muy-Cheng, let us know if you're with us.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes, I'm here. Yes, I was actually thinking about what you were saying, Ben, about this anecdote that you were telling about the water. A lot of people are asking us why our library is still relevant in a world where there's the internet and where access to information is so easy in a sense. I don't think it's easy at all, but where it seems easy at least. And I think it's really it comes to me I have another example of what you the experience that you had. It's you know, we have an organization, a sister organization in the US called Libraries That Borders US, and they started building libraries and meetup place in places where people were. So they brought the library where the people were, in community churches, in interim spaces, but also in laundromats, because in laundromats people spend a lot of time, between 90 minutes and 2 hours, just waiting for their clothes to wash and dry. And some of the time some of the times the poorest people do not have enough money to buy data, and so they just sit there with their mobile phones, but with no data, no connectivity, and have nothing to do basically. And so that's a good time to try to utilize. And they at some point set up a legal clinic there with lawyers that went to the people, talked to them and said, okay, I'm a lawyer, do you have any question? Is there anything I can help you with? And people usually were like, no, I don't have any legal question. They did the same with health professionals who were doing sensitization work. And people said, no, I don't have any health issues. I don't have any question. But the more they got, librarians came in and they talked to them. And the more they talked to them, the more they realized that they actually had legal and health questions. It's just that they didn't formulate them like that. So for instance, they had questions about my landlord is trying to expose me from my apartment. Is he allowed to do that? Or I just came to the US with a green card and I still have my kids back at home. How can I get them to join me? This is a legal question, except that it's not phrased in legal terms. And I think a lot of the role that librarians and educators can have is actually sort of editorializing knowledge. And creating bridges of understanding between different worlds and different acceptions. And so for me, imagination should also be there. And it's this point that someone was making, that imagination should not just be for children, it should also be for educators. And how can we cultivate that in a world that is so normative and so based on competition, and competition has to have standards so that we can rate people. But these are not, I don't think that this is the sort of system that will enable us to face the global challenges as a community, as a learning society. And so I think imagination could be a way to try to build bridges between different worlds, different referentials, and making sure that we're connecting them. And so that these terms of margins would not make sense anymore. It's just different preferentials, different contexts.
I think building bridges of understanding between different worlds through libraries is such a wonderful line to grasp from this. And I think as such as well, I think what seems to be from the conversation is that we're really challenging the title of this conversation as well, because we're challenging, well, what is the sense in separating, the kind of education that we're trying to bring to different groups, and what helps to perpetuate that as well. But yeah, definitely it really resonates. Gerhard, now you're back with us, maybe you can rebound on that as well, because you're creating and have been creating bridges of understanding for many years across many different of your programs. So maybe you can share a little bit more. And if I ask just a couple of minutes each to make sure that we get through everybody before we finish. There's just too much to share before the time that we have, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think, what has been driving human progress on this planet? I mean, if not imagination, I think everything was driven by imagination. And of course, imagination cannot be de-linked from experience. So everyone's imagination is different because we have experienced different circumstances. We come from different cultures. We are different geographies. So all that, I think, builds into the imagination, and that's why I think we can utilize the complementary imagination. And I think we need to bring really actors together and people together to understand that what our different imaginations look like and how we can complement that and harness it. And I mean, there was also the example that Muy mentioned, that irrelevant stuff being delivered to certain contexts. And I think this is also something I see quite frequently, that we have curricula in education displacement that are totally irrelevant. I mean, I was coming across a curricula about a textbook that was talking about tennis and the swimming pools in a refugee camp in the desert in Jordan. So, I mean, that was totally, I mean, it was really strange to see something like this. And I think we have to connect different experiences. We need to ensure that different imaginations build on each other, reinforce each other. I think this is something, this is where we can develop something that is relevant for the people for whom it is meant.
Absolutely, and that builds in and makes me really want to bring in Fiston yourself, because you shared some really important couple of messages in the chat around, you know, rethinking and understanding, you know, who is this imagination and creativity for? Maybe you can just build on that a bit more as well for everyone else.
Like now listening to all guys, I'm thinking of what Gerhard first shared about, you know, creating a good environment, you know, and so that people can connect to the teacher. Let me just say, we people, me as a refugee, who are marginalized, you know, we feel trapped, you know, like in our own current situation, and we lack hope and motivation. And I think using imagination is to, you know, help us change, you know, or understand that change is possible, and that we have potential to create a better future for ourselves and our communities. But in order to allow people to envision a different reality for ourselves, for example, for themselves in the communities, we must look at this in a multifaceted approach, so that we address, you know, these unique needs and challenges. So I think this is where imagination and creativity come into, you know, into play, you know. So that is, I love what Bem actually shared. Thank you so much for that example, by the way. I lived that too.
Bem,
thank you.
We're actually, well, we're almost actually already at our end, but I know that Shiaka, you were burning to kind of respond, and you really kept it to just a couple of minutes and showed remarkable discipline the last time you spoke. So maybe this is an opportunity for you just to rebound in a couple of minutes on just, yeah, what you've gathered and what you wanted to respond back on as well, just earlier.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you for the opportunity for me to go again. And I'll begin with what Fiston has brought to light, and this is what happens it's not only with refugees, I also have a problem with all this called charitable work. It's more solidarity than charity. It's just people coming together to find solutions for each other. But like most of these groups, because let's say refugees, I would say, like, I'm a son of a former refugee. My mom came to Uganda in the 60s, was with her family from Rwanda. They crossed into Uganda. And the community where I grew up in is full of people from different countries, from Congo, Rwanda, Burundi. It's like an African Union in the middle of Uganda. So in this neighborhood, you'd realize how there's already an assumption of what you need as refugees, or what you deserve as people in need. Or let's say you don't have access to education. Like, it's good enough if they learn how to read and write. That's good enough. They're refugees. So I don't know, Fiston, if this is what I got from the point you're trying to put across. There's already a package, and you grow up thinking, as a refugee, this is all I deserve. This is the kind of education I deserve. So true, because I've seen it even with the work I'm doing with sexual reproductive health and menstrual hygiene and menstrual health management. Like, it's always an assumption of, they don't have. Whatever could come in would be useful. So you get into a situation where, you're in need, but you have no choice of what you really need. So it's me who coming in as a hero, as a savior, as a helper to decide, like, this is what you need. And I think that has messed up most of the solutions brought about with these organizations or people trying their best to solve the solutions, and then it has brought about this entitlement of us who work with organizations or in this humanitarian field, thinking like, yeah, we know better than what these people are going through. I'll give an example of, I've talked about my work with sexual reproductive health. I opened the first, what we call a menstruation station. And this is like a safe space. This is like a safe space for menstrual challenges and stigma and what and stuff. And we got credit for designing this space that solves most of it's a safe space, it's a creative space as well. But no one knows the design came from these refugee kids from Somalia, from Congo, because the question was always, what do you think is your biggest problem? What do you think the solution is? And we came up with this space. And today everyone praises the well-being, that's the name of the organization, and Shaka for designing this big solution. But the solutions are always there, like the example Ben gave, like there's a life experience that comes with knowledge. And I think if we imagine a bit more, we would tap into that knowledge that has not been tapped into. And the imagination is the bridge for us to get there. Thank you, Ed.
Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I love the openness. I love the sharing. I would like to point out just to some of the organizations that are watching this. Anybody who is thinking about some of these challenges and is trying to do something about it, big ups to you, because majority of the world is just living their lives, not really caring about what is going on. All we are asking, as you design solutions, as you think through some of these challenges, think about them with the people you are trying to come up with potential solutions for. And you would find, like even in Nigeria, for example, there are over 300 languages and tribes and things that come with that. And the size of our country is like one state in Australia. But then the diversity in people and thinkings and knowledge is so much that you will need to interact with each group to kind of come up with different things with different people. So that's the bit I'll take. Let's just keep doing fantastic stuff. And thank you so much for allowing me to be part of this journey with you. Over to you, Ed.
Thanks so much, Ben, for co-steering this. To each of you, Muy-Cheng, to Gerhard, to Chiaka, to Fiston, for your wisdom, for your words, for your challenges as well. There's so much that we'll be gathering from this chat as well. For those watching now, don't hesitate to join us tomorrow at the same time, looking at imagination for peace building. And if you are watching this later on, it's probably the link just below you as well. Thanks each of you so much for your time. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again very soon for some more Imagination TV. Have a great day, everyone.